Welcome, everyone, to today's Explainer. We're jumping right in today because we are taking a deep dive into something truly colossal. We're going to look at the sheer, awe-inspiring scale of the Brahmaputra River. You know, we often hear about great rivers, but this isn't just a river. It's an absolute force of nature that shapes land, sustains millions of people, and frankly, completely defies standard engineering. Here's our quick roadmap for today. To really wrap our heads around the Brahmaputra's massive scale, we're going to start with the ancient peninsular rivers as a baseline. Then, we'll look at the massive Brahmaputra's emergence, its journey of many names, its staggering scale and hydropower potential, and finally, its ecology and the Great Delta.
Okay, let's dive into this, starting with Part 1, the ancient peninsular rivers.
So, if we look at the rivers of Central and South India, the peninsular block, like the Godavari or Krishna, we're actually looking at a drainage system that is way older than the Himalayas. Over millions of years, these ancient rivers have carved out these really broad, shallow, and mature valleys. Because they flow over a super hard plateau surface, their paths are highly stable. They're settled, they don't meander wildly all over the place. And since they're mostly rain-fed, their flow is pretty predictable, shrinking down during the dry seasons. Geographically speaking, the Western Ghats mountain range acts as this giant water divide. It basically sends the vast majority of these calm seasonal rivers flowing toward the east. The big exceptions here are the Narmada and Tapi rivers, which uniquely flow west because they're channeled through these ancient rift valleys. But overall, you can think of this as a very calm, grounded, and predictable river system. And that brings us to a really stark contrast. If the peninsular rivers are ancient, shallow, and stable, well, the Himalayan rivers are literally the exact opposite. They are young, incredibly deep, incredibly volatile, and fueled by massive melting glaciers. Having this grounded, familiar baseline really highlights just how gargantuan and terrifying our main subject is. Which brings us to Part 2. The massive Brahmaputra emerges.
The birth of this river it's absolutely dramatic. It starts as this small stream of glacial melt at the Kim-Dung Glacier in Tibet, about 60 kilometers from Mansarovar Lake. It begins flowing east, where it's known locally as its Tsangpo. After traveling for hundreds of kilometers through the Tibetan plateau, it basically smashes into the Himalayas and makes this sharp, impossibly deep horseshoe bend to cut right through the mountains. And because of the sheer kinetic energy at that exact bend, it's actually a site of intense geopolitical focus right now, frequently looked at as a potential location for massive Chinese hydroelectric dam projects.
Just to give you a really visceral sense of this river's scale right from the jump, as it moves through Tibet, this massive body of water is already carving through the earth at a staggering altitude of 4,000 feet. Think about that for a second. It is the only river system of this immense magnitude flowing at such an extreme elevation. Let's move to the next part and see how this builds in Section 3, A Journey of Many Names. As it crashes through international borders, mountains, and valleys, it constantly sheds and gains names. It's almost like it's reinventing itself. In Tibet, it's the Tsangpo. Then, when it plunges into the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, it becomes the Dibang. It merges with rivers like the Lohit as it hits Assam, where it finally takes the name Brahmaputra. But it doesn't even stop there. Entering Bangladesh, it transforms into the Jamuna, eventually merging with the mighty Padma, which is the Ganga, before finally emptying out into the Bay of Bengal as the Meghna.
Breaking down its massive 2,900-kilometer total journey, it's wild to notice just how much of this giant actually flows completely outside of India. It travels 1,625 kilometers through Tibet, 918 kilometers through India, and its final 363 kilometers through Bangladesh. It is truly a transnational behemoth.
Part 4. Staggering Scale and Hydropower. This is where the numbers get really crazy. Now, what's really interesting about this next number is the depth, 380 feet. That is the recorded maximum depth of the Brahmaputra. Think back to those shallow peninsular rivers we just talked about, where you could almost wade across some parts in the dry season. Here, you have a river plummeting 380 feet deep. The volume of water moving through that channel is literally incomprehensible. And it's not just deep, right? It is impossibly wide. During peak flow, the Brahmaputra can expand to a maximum width of 18 kilometers. Actually, scratch that. Try to visualize it. Imagine standing on one bank, and the river is so incredibly wide you literally cannot see the other side. It completely redefines what a river is even supposed to look like.
Because of these jaw-dropping dimensions, it makes total sense why locals revere it not just as a river, but as a moving ocean. Uniquely, in a culture where rivers are almost exclusively given female names, the Brahmaputra, which translates to son of Brahma, carries a male name. This perfectly reflects its aggressive, towering, ocean-like dominance over the landscape. All that moving water holds unimaginable kinetic power. Surveys estimate the Brahmaputra has a hydropower potential of 12,000 megawatts in India alone. To put that massive number into perspective, tapping into just that amount of power would be enough to sustain the energy needs of the entire northeast region of India. It is an absolute goldmine of kinetic energy.
And this immense volume doesn't just appear out of thin air. The sheer power of this moving ocean is the result of a catchment area draining water from 5 different nations: India, China, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. It acts as a massive geographic funnel for a huge chunk of the Asian continent. Finally, let's wrap up with Part 5, Ecology and the Great Delta.
The Brahmaputra is a supreme artist of the landscape. It starts off in the brown, dry, and often barren plateaus of Tibet, where life is pretty hard to sustain. But as it brings its immense volume of water down into the Himalayan valleys, it literally paints the entire landscape green. It single-handedly creates the dense, lush rainforests of Assam, supporting rare biodiversity, like the iconic one-horned rhino in the world-renowned Kaziranga National Park.
But its absolute masterpiece is at the very end of its journey. When the Brahmaputra merges with the Ganga, it creates the Sundarbans. This is the world's largest river delta, an evergreen mangrove forest, spanning a massive 10,000 square kilometers. The name itself actually comes from the local Sundari trees that completely thrive in this unique environment, built entirely by the river's massive delivery of water and sediment. The biodiversity supported down here is absolutely breathtaking. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's the largest tiger reserve on Earth, home to the majestic Royal Bengal tigers, and even acts as a sanctuary for the incredibly rare white Bengal tiger. And we have to remember, this entire, vibrant ecosystem exists solely because of the Brahmaputra. So, the crucial point is understanding the dual nature of this beast. Yes, it's a creator of immense, life-sustaining ecosystems and a vital economic artery. But that exact same staggering scale makes it a force of sheer devastation. Every single year during the monsoon, the river swells to a terrifying degree, spilling over its 18-kilometer width, submerging millions of square kilometers, and displaying a raw, aggressive power that engineers have struggled for decades to tame. We've seen its ancient origins, its mind-boggling ocean-like scale, and its dual capacity to give life and instantly take it away. It leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to end our explainer today. Looking at the sheer impact of the Brahmaputra across 5 nations, we really have to ask, if this massive, terrifying, and completely volatile force didn't exist, would the lush, vibrant Himalayan foothills simply be a barren wasteland? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and I hope this gave you a clear, powerful picture of one of the world's absolute greatest natural wonders. Catch you next time!